Meanwhile, how are things going on the impending empty shelves?
Because business has slowed down, as you mentioned, we're seeing as a result, the ports here in the U.S., the traffic has really slowed, and now thousands of dock workers and truck drivers are worried about their jobs.
That means we lose less money. You know, when I see that, that means we lose less money. Look, China was making over $1 trillion, 1.1 trillion, in my opinion. You know, different numbers from 500 billion.
It's actually like Scrooge logic, you know? Like subsisting off of dead rats, because if you go to the grocery store to buy money, you have less money than you did before.
To $1 trillion or $1.1 trillion, I think it was 1.1 trillion. And frankly, if we didn't do business, we would have been better off. Okay, you understand that. So when you say it slowed down, that's a good thing, not a bad thing. But we're going to make it so they can, I'd like to say they could do better, actually, in terms of the bottom line. We'd like to see China opened up so we can compete in China and, you know, give people something that they've never had, you know, access to something. That'd be great for the world. It would be great for our businesses. And I think it would be great for friendship. I really expect a lot of people think I'm a militant guy. I'm really not. I think that trade can bring a greater friendship with China.
So yeah, obviously he is mentally compromised and nothing that he says means anything. So, you know, you're not going to... the same as it ever was, I suppose. Are people in the U.S. ignoring the incoming catastrophe? Yeah, I mean, the fact that, like, ships are coming into the ports empty, you know, people don't seem to be really factoring that in. We're just about running out of the back storage that a bunch of companies bought up in Q1 in anticipation of the tariffs, you know? Trump approval rebounding too is insane. It's not insane. You have to understand, and you're never going to get anywhere in politics until you understand this, okay? Voters are, especially American voters, profoundly retarded. The reason Trump's approval rating is rebounding is because people heard a lot of very negative news right after the tariffs were imposed. People heard a lot of, like, really negative stories about what was going to happen. And then what happened? Nothing. Right? Nothing happened. The markets dipped, but then they undipped. Nothing. Everything's fine. But the ports are empty? Yeah, sure. And how many workers, or how many American voters are dock workers, right? The people just don't know. They don't know. I know it seems difficult to imagine when a significant part of your life is consuming and processing ongoing news. I understand that, but it's important to understand they don't know. And they won't know until the shelves run empty and the prices spike. Some people who are buying off Temu or Shein or whatever, you know, they're mad at the price hikes now, but they still haven't seen what it looks like when stuff at their local stores either isn't there or is much more expensive. And then there are two paths that these voters can go down, right? They can get mad at Trump, which a lot of them will, and his approval rating will go down again. Or for the true believers, they're going to really lean into that MAGA Maoism thing, the ascetic cult, where the virtue signal is not needing anything at all. Under Biden, the fact that anything went up in price was traitorous. He should be, you know, Biden should have been tried at Nuremberg for the inflation crisis, you know? But under Trump, now it's like, well, you don't need 30 toys, you need 3. You don't need all this cheap Chinese crap, you know, you only need a few things. And the true believers will fall in line with that. They'll say, well, no, actually, the most patriotic thing that you can do is to be poor and suffer. You're the one who's attached to all of these material possessions. You're the traitor. You're the one who's bought in on it. It's called MAGA communism. It's Maoism. Like, you joke, but unironically, there are a lot of ideological overlaps between what the MAGA camp is doing here and a lot of the stuff that, like, well, I can't say Mao promoted, but that Maoists talk about. How do I hedge my retirement against everything? I don't know, buy gold. It is pretty funny. So, like, we basically, like, rhetorically, our position is shifting, right? Because it used to be we had to argue against people who were pretending to be upset about Biden's economy, even though Biden's economy, at least in a relative sense, was doing fine. But now we're going to have to argue with people who think that it's virtuous and patriotic to consume less. You're going to be hearing like a bunch of disingenuous climate change arguments. Oh, don't you think it's good that people consume less? So much for caring about the environment. Lefties yesterday, we need to consume less goods so the environment is fine. Lefties today, no, give me my sweet treats from China. Ah! And like these arguments are being made by Nazis who don't care which side of the fence they're on. They just hate you. They don't believe any of their positions. He has been going on about the dolls quite a bit lately. He's a lot like the average transgender on Twitter. Give me the quote.
To President Xi of China.
Somebody said, oh, the shelves are going to be open. Well, maybe the children will have 2 dolls instead of 30 dolls, you know? And maybe the 2 dolls will cost a couple of bucks more than they would normally. But we're not talking about something that we have to go out of our way.
Of course, the reason why they're saying dolls is because, yeah, exactly, they want to equate worrying about the economy with something childish. They want to equate worrying about inflation and price hikes and poor trade deals to be emotionally equated to something that's childish, feminine, trivial. That's the reason why. Dolls? Really? That's the thing you think of when you talk about like millions of tons of cargo not making it to the United States? Just dolls? It's everything, man. Everything. It's avocado toast all over again? Yeah, to an extent. And to the extent that you're like minimizing the severity of an economic issue by trivializing it. You know, you're essentially doing like a fallacy, right? A reducto ad absurdum at the concept of being concerned about these prices. Yeah, he was talking about that. Pencils, strollers, always in the context of, at the very least, like, children, right? Pencils. Who writes with pencils? Well, usually kids in school, right? Strollers are for babies. Dolls are for little girls. You get me. What they're playing with, right? He doesn't know what Fortnite is. He might know what Fortnite is. He might know. He might know. I'm not sure. What's a stroller, though? I guess, is a stroller like the technical term, or is that just like a euphemism or a common term that we use in America? Do they have a different word for that in other countries? A stroller is like a little carriage you push a child in. Oh, pram is what the Brits call it, right? They call it a pram. Baby carriage? Yeah, there you go. Yeah. I was about to say, what do you mean you don't know what a stroller is? But then it occurred to me, stroller sounds like a slang term, doesn't it? Right? Like, oh, you're going on a stroll. You're pushing, you get what I mean? It seems like the kind of thing where it's like, well, that's not like its proper term. I don't really know. Push chair. Yeah, I don't know. MAGA Maoism. MAGA Maoism. Actually, most Brits call it a buggy. Pram is kind of posh. Really? I didn't know that. That's interesting. Anyway, I'm not joking about any of this. I've already seen big conservative accounts arguing about the moral virtue of consuming less. For one, again, obviously I don't believe this. The funny thing is that I feel kind of weird even talking about it because I've been talking about the virtue of buying more expensive things less often for a while in the context of clothing, right? Like you buy like a high quality t-shirt with a nice like reinforced rib-necked collar or something, and you can wear that basically forever. It gets stained, throw in some oxygen bleach, throw in some enzymatic cleaner. Dump some powder in the bin, whatever. Wear it for the next 10 years. How is this a controversial thing? Isn't that just common sense? This is a difficult thing to talk about because a lot of people are suffering, but it's important to understand that for the average person, you are wealthier and can consume more things than previous generations. I know it doesn't feel that way. You feel like in the 2000s, the 90s, whatever, people had more opportunities. And they certainly did with regard to their future. There are specific costs that have skyrocketed. Healthcare, education, rent, buying a house is out of the possibility of, for most people. But in terms of day-to-day expenses, people spend, on average, a smaller percentage of their paycheck on groceries than they used to. People have more things than they used to. It's easier than ever to get computer, phone, whatever. The problem is that what amount of stuff we consider acceptable to have as a baseline for a dignified existence changes over time. And there's nothing wrong with that. 100 years ago, what a baseline level of personal possessions was very, very different to what it is today. No one would consider themselves poor back then for not having access to the kinds of consumer goods we have access to today. Not just because they didn't exist. Even if they did exist back then, it just wasn't expected. But expectations mean a lot in terms of defining what a person needs to consider themselves happy. It's kind of like a hedonic treadmill problem, but on like a broader social level, you know? There are some things that become genuine necessities, like phones. Smartphones are pretty much a necessity, you know? You just, to interact with the modern world, it's really, really, really important, you know? But in a lot of cases, they are just luxury goods that we've gotten used to. Now, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that people should live in luxury to the extent that it's possible, you know? But I do also think that sometimes the decision to spend frugally feels like a more radical choice than it might have in the past. I think that if we went back 50, 60, 70 years before the modern credit economy, it would have been a lot more common for people to say, I can't do that, I don't have the money. But nowadays, a lot of people feel socially pressured to spend their money very frivolously because it's possible to, because it's easy to borrow money in the form of credit cards, because it's easy to get it, and there's a million like buy now, pay later schemes, Klarna bullshit. The whole socioeconomic superstructure is designed to extract as much from you as possible and make you a debt slave. So even though we have access to more luxury goods, I would say that the system is much more exploitative than it used to be. In an environment like this, choosing to buy less can be, I wouldn't say a radical decision, but definitely a subversive one. If you're moderate with how you spend, you know, how you use your money. The problem, of course, is that these MAGA Maoist types don't actually believe in any of this crap. They just want to defend Trump no matter what. A good way of demonstrating this is that they will talk about the moral virtue of consuming less, but if Trump actually did manage to turn the economy around and all of a sudden consumer goods were widely available, they would say, thank God, Trump made all this crap cheap. Let's go. He fixed the economy. You know, Heil Trump. And then all of the talk about less consumerism, about not buying stuff from China, about it's virtuous to consume less, all out the window. They don't believe in anything at all. You only need 3 dolls. Oh, you can buy 50 now? Buy 50, motherfucker. Those are Trump dolls. They don't believe in anything. They just hate you. And they want to, you know, vice signal within the cult. You get me, right? That being said, I don't disagree with the idea that, you know, it's probably good to buy less and develop a deeper affection for the things that you do buy, but that doesn't have anything to do with what's happening here. Keep in mind, again, that Trump's tariffs are also making my preferred American-made clothing brands more expensive. So, you know, they just opened up a Mersby Schwanen shirt store in, well, not just shirts, but they're known for their shirts, in New York City. The shirt's worn by Jeremy Allen White in The Bear. They just opened it up just a few, I think, months ago. But it's a German store. And where does that cotton come from? Well, it's high-quality cotton. Where do you get high-quality cotton from? Not Germany, Egypt. Basically, what I'm saying is tariffs are bad. What is even the point to the right's rhetoric? Since none of them believe it anyway. It's really, really difficult to argue with people who don't believe the things they're telling you because, and this is the stuff that most people can't wrap their head around, including myself, they believe the things that they don't believe. It's kind of like the logical endpoint to being a permatroll, like being in a state of constant epic trolling, which is that you start to believe the things that you're saying to rile other people up, because you're carving out the devil's advocate exemptions in your head for when your argument would be valid against theirs. Or to put it another way, they make a disingenuous argument against you, but in their head, they're thinking, ha, that lefty really is hypocritical. They were anti-consumption up until Trump made it harder to consume, and now they're pro-consumption. So my anti-consumption argument, where I call them hypocritical, may not be true in my mind, but it is true in theirs. So I believe it as an argument against them. And because they think the argument that they're using against you is valid against you, they treat it in their heart as valid in general. So even if you argue through the exception, they still act as though they believe it. Unfortunately, this is like unwinnable from the perspective of trying to directly convince them. The most you can do is humiliate them and make them suffer. Really, like just make them unhappy and socially ostracize them. It's important to know that unlike actual trolls who don't believe the things they're saying and are doing it to have fun, these people are miserable. Like, look at any conservative account. You think these people are having fun? They're wretched, they're miserable, and for a lot of them, the only thing they're living for is the vice signaling and the signs of affirmation they get from other people just as bad as them. So, listen, they are a cognito hazard. They're a disease. They are hurting people and themselves for no reason. Like, it's so stupid. They could just stop. They could just stop. It's a civilizationally, erosive force. It's not being done. It's like you're not factoring in or accounting for the normal systems of like, well, different people benefit from different things and different people have different incentives. It has nothing to do with that. It's just universally bad for everyone for no reason except it's cathartic for them. So really, you just have to socially ostracize them, just bully and make fun of them. And sometimes they'll be convinced by your arguments, but not when you talk to them directly. If you're talking to one of these MAGA Maoist types directly, like one of these like true believer types directly, you'll never convince them. But sometimes they can look in from the outside and they can see how much better life is on the other side of the fence, and they might try to move over a little bit. Why do you think the right has always been so invested in trying to make themselves believe that people on the left are miserable? You noticed how the default like AI generated image that they make of the opposition is not like a triumphantly evil Antifa person who delights in causing the misery of others, but rather a like sobbing, crying, fat SJW stereotype out of 2013. They want themselves to believe that we're always upset and miserable. And the reason they want that is because they really don't want to accept the fact that their lifestyles are making them miserable, and it could be different. You get me. Yeah, they don't want to believe there's a better world. At the end of the day, people will, for the most part, shift into political and social camps that they think benefit them and make them happy. Morals are usually secondary. It's unfortunate, but like people tend to gravitate towards belief systems that align them with people who they want to be around, you know? That's one of the reasons why it's important to not be moralistic and ascetic when you argue in favor of good things. If your argument is that the best thing for the world is for you personally to suffer in your service towards it, that's not a convincing argument for a lot of people. You'll convince monks, you'll convince Jesuits, you'll convince ascetics. You're not going to convince most people. Most people want to be happy. So it's important to be happy, which is one of the reasons why I talk about the stuff that I talk about the way I talk about it. I think that it's often like an under-discussed element of activism on the left, which is that you need to cultivate a healthy internal community as well. Not just because, no, I'm not talking about hedonism, Kes Kitty. I'm just talking about like living a good life. Because that's part of the equation, right? Basically, I'm just saying, take some notes from previous civil rights leaders, right? Dr. Martin Luther King and Malcolm X both understood that a core component of fighting white supremacy was building a happy black life, right? Like, you can turn everyone into a martyr if you want to. That's possible. But that doesn't really fight the dynamic. If the dynamic is like perpetual black suffering, doing it for a good cause is just like a reification of the existing trend. You have to find the better way. You have to integrate good living into the structure of how you engage with the world, which is one of the reasons why I sometimes think other people on the left adopt way too much of like a performatively suicidal revolutionary aesthetic rhetoric where they're like, well, nothing matters, you know, life is falling apart, society's falling apart, the revolution's going to happen soon, just be ready for it. It's like you're making yourself miserable and you're not like putting money into a Roth IRA account. Like you're not building your own life. You're just LARPing basically. And you're making yourself look miserable. You probably are miserable and you're off-putting to other people. The only people who buy this like revolutionary suicidal asceticism are people who are themselves suicidal, which is not a great bedrock to build you know, a good movement on, right? No disrespect to the suicidal among us or anything, but you know, I'm just saying, like, you probably shouldn't be. It's always been one of my critiques of degrowth. Not that it's a bad idea, but that the way it's posed, the way it's presented, is usually done in the context of like, you need to have less. But I'm going to be real with you guys, and I'm going to talk about this in the context of clothing because that's what I understand. I think that you are happier. I think you're a happier person if, rather than churning through fast fashion, buying a bunch of shit clothing that falls apart in the wash, tossing it out, buying the new trend, whatever, you instead have like 3 well-worn t-shirts that you love that are high quality, that'll last basically forever, a jacket or two, a pair of jeans, some shorts, and then you just go out dressed like that. And it fits you properly. Every individual item was expensive, but the wardrobe as a whole cost less than the cheap crap that you had before. And then you just have that. And maybe you add a new item as you develop a wardrobe like over time, like every once in a while. You know, I think that would make you happier. And what I'm advocating for is a kind of degrowth, but I'm not doing it from the perspective of like, you should have less clothes to not hurt the environment. Even though I do believe that, I think that, you know, you could be happier. You get me, right? I don't know. I'm sorry. I wanted to talk about this because like the MAGA Maoism thing has really been like growing lately, and it's only going to grow more. And I wanted to talk about it a little more substantively than just like, here's a new segment of Trump being a retard, which, you know, that's like 40% of my channel at minimum. When you outgrow some clothes styles you don't care for, are you going to donate those clothes or hoard them? I've donated quite a few clothes. At first, the clothes I donated were my old wardrobe, stuff I bought before I knew about clothing. And lately, every once in a while, it's been items that I bought errantly. Though I'm happy to say that over time, I've been buying stuff that I end up using like less. Or sorry, that I end up not wearing less. I'll admit though, I did approach the hobby from the unfortunate position of having a lot of big ideas, but little personal knowledge and a lot of money. So a lot of the stuff that I bought at first was like, oh, of course, you know, everybody has like a high quality sashiko weave, Japanese camp collar, da da da, and then like the shit doesn't fit me properly, you know? But I've been dialing back on that. Folks, measure your body. Do you have any idea how much clothing I've had to return because I just forgot what my chest measurement was? Measure your body. Get a tape measurer for like $1.